Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy time zone. It's another 425 show. I am one of your hosts. My other host is I'm not even sure. We should just do a little wave to JP. I think we've got a stream planned in early January. It's always kind of weird this time of year with the holidays creeping up. It's a little harder to get folks available to stream. It's a little harder to get some of these streams across the finish line. So if you've been following us thus far, you know that we've been focusing very heavily on Entra Permissions Management. We're running, we call it a swarm. You could think about it as an awareness campaign over the course of November, December, and January. And we've got a lot of activities. So if you are just tuning in now and you've been missing some of the activities, check out this blog. Now, this blog highlights all of the activities that we have planned. And note that if you look at the chart and you're looking at dates in the future, the link for the future will just take you to our Twitch channel. As the on demand content becomes live, we will be switching those links up. So bookmark this link, take a look at the blog, tune into whatever makes the most sense, and note that at the end of January, or at least over the course of January, we'll be running a hackathon. So we're in the process of getting all of that fine-tuned at the moment, but it's an awesome opportunity to get some swag from Microsoft and participate with Microsoft product team members, just to get a feel for how you can make the Entra Permissions Management solution more seamless, right? Or you can think about an end-to-end scenario that maybe the product team hasn't yet thought through. So pay attention to the hackathon, join us for what you can. And that brings me kind of to the next topic. One of the areas that you can participate with us pretty heavily is our NDA advisors community. So as a customer, you can join the NDA advisors community and you can tune into weekly calls. This is where you can hear about roadmap information. You get a chance to learn about private previews. This is all really great if you're considering about changing or considering, I guess, the opportunity to help change and shape the product. So we always encourage that folks join this community if they feel inclined. Now, sometimes customers don't yet quite know what they don't know. So that seems like it might be a lot. We also run a Discord server. And if you haven't joined our Discord server, you should join. We've got a lot of community driven efforts inside of the channels that we run. A lot of folks are doing identity work all over the world, and they go in there and they ask questions and they usually get answers without a lot of extra help from the Microsoft folks that are in that Discord server. So it's a great community led effort. Now, today is going to be interesting because we were thinking through some of the Entra Permissions Management content that exists right now with this awareness campaign that we've been running. And Guru did a great job of talking about this, kind of taking Entra Permissions Management for a test drive. So without further ado, let me bring Guru on from the backstage. Hi, Guru.
Hey Shannon, how's it going? It's great to
Good.
be out of backstage in front and center now.
I wish we really had a green room, right? Like, I wish it was like a real talk show. We actually
Right.
had, hors d'oeuvres and coffee and drinks, right? We don't.
Come out the door over
So
there.
it's right. Yeah, it's the virtual green room. But yeah, so Guru and I, we were chit-chatting about some of the content he built for the NDA advisors communities, and we realized what he was showcasing wasn't NDA, and we could get an extra stream out of this. And so the focal point today is going to be taking Entra Permissions Management for a test drive. And Guru, I know you were on the show. Gosh, it was almost about a month ago, I think. But
Well,
maybe for the folks that are brand new, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself again and kind of talk about your role on a daily basis.
yeah. So my name is Guru. I'm on the product team along with Shannon. And before I joined the product team, I was actually a developer at CloudKnox who worked on cloud infrastructure entitlements management. And then we got acquired by Microsoft. We released Entra Permissions Management into GA last July, and the rest is history. And yeah, I'm glad to be on the stream once again, Shannon. And yeah, it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. It feels like just yesterday.
I know it does, especially when we had the long holiday weekend, right? And I don't know if you eat a lot of turkey, but I do. So the Thanksgiving holiday always feels like it's super short, even though it is 4 days. So,
Feels like a
um,
week.
right. So yeah, so I think the goal today would be to showcase enterprise management a little bit deeper than even what we've done thus far, right? Like we've got a lot of great videos that are out there, but taking it for that kind of that test drive, I think would be an extra way to sort of sweeten the deal if customers are interested, if folks tuning in are trying to figure out would this make sense for our multi-cloud environment.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'm happy to do that, Shannon. So, yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen
Cool.
and try to take you guys through this as best I can, right? And so here we go,
All
sharing my
right, let's
screen.
bring it
Can
live.
you can you
Oh,
see my screen?
we can. We can.
You can? Awesome. Okay, so
Yes.
yeah, for those of you who don't know how to access permissions management from your Azure AD tenant, you can basically log into from entra.microsoft. You will see a big file here that says permissions management, and you all you have to do is go ahead and click on go to permissions management. If you have not yet bought or got haven't had a free trial license yet, it the license yet and tell you directions as to what links you can click on to go in and get the licenses so you can actually try this out. And we are a multi-cloud permissions management solution. And so for those of you who missed the previous stream, where Murtala goes does an overview of our entire application. I would suggest you guys go in and check that out as well and would get more information as I have to offer. But today I'm going to go and give a deep dive as to an important aspect of our application that most of our users should be using as a metric for determining whether they are actually remediating their missions, correctly based on the activity of their identity. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into the app here. And inside the app, by the way, Shannon, if for any reason you cannot see my screen or anything, just let me know.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. We did
yeah,
have some weirdness with your video camera, but I think we could still hear you. We could still see your screen. So every once in a while, the gremlins aren't nice when we do these live shows. So I
it
think
really
so long
is.
as we can still hear you and see the demo, we might have a frozen guru for a second or two, but I think it eventually catches itself up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we come to the Enter Permissions Management app from the Azure AD portal, we end up on the dashboard, right? And on the dashboard, the very first thing that we tell you or we show you is the permission creep index of your environment. So as we stated before, we are multi-cloud, so you can select any one of these cloud service providers from here based on what you onboard with Entra Permissions Management. And we're able to show you the permissions creep index of your entire account. And basically, what these bubbles signify is, how big that account is and what range of permission creep index that you're in. The higher your permission creep, the more vulnerabilities your account has, or in this case, your Azure subscription has, in terms of permissions that are being granted that are unused. And so, what we do here is that we take your permission set that you already have. We basically determine from logs what permissions that you use. That
Sure.
you have used, and we take your unused permissions and see which of those permissions are high risk, right? And what we mean by high risk permissions are permissions that provide update, uh, write, or delete capability.
Okay.
Uh, and basically, we take those permissions, and based on how many permissions that are unused that are in that high risk category, the higher your permissions creep index will be for that particular identity. And then we take all your identities PCIs put together to create your authorization system wide, or in this case, subscription wide PCI that you see here, Shannon.
Okay. Now, how would a customer get that PCI score from like a high range to a medium or a low range?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Shannon. And really, there are like multiple levels that you can go to in order to get your PCI down to the medium or even low levels. And like we call it, like there's like the low hanging fruit, right? And then you sort of get more granular as you go along and get into the nitty gritty. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this stream. We're going to start off with the low hanging fruit, where your permissions creep index could improve the most, and then get into like where can you improve granularly to help your
Sure.
permission creep index even more, correct? And so when we go, the first thing I want to do here is like when we go and click on this, um, click on that Azure subscription, you can see that hey, you have this many users, this many apps, and this many managed identities that are in the high, medium, and low range. So you can sort of get a sense of where are my vulnerabilities. Is it with human identities, as in users? Is it with non-human identities in terms of apps or managed identities in this case? And you can really frame out what you want to do in terms of reducing your permissions creep index based on that finding alone, right? But the real sauce is when I scroll down here and I come to what we call the identity findings. And these are what we call the low hanging fruit, Shannon.
Okay.
And basically, you basically take these findings and make them directly actionable towards your permissions creep index reduction. So the first thing I wanted to go over here was this inactive users that we see here. So you can actually go ahead, you can click on those inactive users, and you can go ahead and click on the subscription in that's in concern for you, and you can and you will be redirected to what we call the permission analytics report.
Okay.
And in this permission analytics, we have various findings here, but let's focus on the findings that are very that are very much related to the permissions creep index, right? And so if you look at inactive users here, these are users that have not done any activity in the past 90 days. And as you can see here, there are several users who have a high PCI. And so what you can do is that by disabling or deleting these users, you are you're doing the service of actually reducing your PCI in this case, and it wouldn't be that hard because all you're doing is disabling and deleting, and then those users are then removed from the PCI calculation in the next collection. So really, like just going through this list of users right here, and then this is a paginated list, and we do also have like a CSV report for
Okay.
this, and so you can actually go through the entire CSV with and this is an Excel sheet. Actually, this report is an Excel sheet with sheets that pertain to each one of the findings, Shannon. So
Oh,
in those sheets, you can go and find the inactive users Excel sheet, and can go through each one of those users and see, okay, why is this user not performed any activity in the last 90 days, and do that investigation. And then eventually, when you get to disabling or deleting those users
hmm,
in the next collection, you will see those users basically not show up in the application anymore. And then based on that, your permissions creep index would reduce significantly, in my opinion, especially when if you remove the users with high permission creep
sure.
indices.
Now, this sounds
Shannon.
like, and now, so I know when I worked with customers more closely, right? Now I'm just talking about things broadly to a large audience. At least that's our hope, right? We'd always start with a crawl, walk, run analogy. This sounds like it's in that crawl phase. Is there anything
Mhm.
else in that crawl phase that might be an easy, quick win to reduce the PCI score?
So this is really like what is the crawl phase,
Okay.
Shannon? Like when the next part in the where between crawl and walk is this super identities finding, which I'll be going
Okay.
over next. But just like inactive users, we have inactive service principals, we have inactive serverless functions, and these
Okay.
all contribute to your PCI as well. And so by going over these lists, you will do yourself a service, and also reduce your PCI greatly. Another
Okay.
finding that we have here is inactive groups, and you can actually see
Ah.
which groups are inactive. So if all members of a group are not using the permissions that are being granted by that group, you can go ahead and remove those groups as well. and or remove all the users from that group. This group does not show up in your entitlement. So that is another way to really clean up your cloud environment, and that's really what we're all about. We're all about helping you remove the excess permissions, the excess waste from your identity
Yeah.
infrastructure, and that is really the responsibility of the inactive identities and the inactive groups findings. Now, jumping into like what we call the walk phase, right,
Hmm.
Shannon, and like from the crawl, and like
Right.
I guess you're a baby and like you
Right.
are trying to walk for the first time. This is what it would feel like,
Okay.
right? And so that's really what the identities finding is all about. So as we can see in the super identities finding, so what are super identities in the first place, right? So a super identity can be a human or entity with authority to perform actions equivalent to root access. So what does that mean? It means you have access to perform all activity on all resources in that particular cloud environment. So in this case, in this Azure subscription, these users have permissions to perform activity on all resources. So for some admins, you'll be able to justify why they have these admin privileges, right? And basically they need it for like break glass scenarios, they need it for emergencies that don't occur every 90 days, or at least I hope they don't occur every 90 days. And there are some roles like in Azure, for example, that contain certain sets of permissions that are needed by even like small developers on a like once per 90-day basis, right? And so
Sure.
you find this list, right? And this list starts off small because the number of admins that are in a subscription are controlled at first, but then it grows over time, and we help you manage this list so that it doesn't get out of control, right? And so we see the users here, and like obviously by looking at this list, a lot of these users either need to be disabled or deleted. These Some of these users would also show up active identities finding as well, Shannon. But you might say that, hey, maybe this first year here, they're not using all of the admin permissions, but they need to be an admin, and I don't want this user to be a part of the PCI calculation. So
Sure.
there's actually something you can do to remove user from the PCI collection, Shannon. So you can go ahead, you can checkbox this user, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a tag, right? I'm going
Okay.
to add a tag to exclude this user from the PCI. So we have a tag
Ah.
CK exclude from PCI,
Okay.
and then I'll put in a value like as in it's a demo, and then when I save this tag on this particular user, what happens is that in the next collection, this user will not be considered in the overall PCI collection. So this is
Interesting.
something that you can use for your admins who obviously don't use all the permissions that are granted to them on a daily basis. But again, I will say that this is not a feature that you should be abusing, right? You should
Right.
not say,
Right.
"Oh,
Makes sense.
everybody's an admin, so everybody gets these permissions."
Right.
Um,
Makes sense.
and we don't care about the PCI for all of these, and we'll keep our PCI low by adding people to this list, right? It's a
Yeah.
it's a feature that is meant for admins who are meant to be admins who don't use all the permissions, and understandably so, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Now, so we've talked a little bit about collections each time that, the permissions management runs a collection. How often does that happen, right? Because we've got solutions in Azure. It's like a 12-hour window, I think, for Defender, or maybe it's 24. I can't remember, and I shouldn't be held to it because it has changed, but it might even be 24 hours. Is it that long with Enter Permissions Management?
It's actually once per hour with Entra Permissions
Oh,
Management,
okay.
and yeah, and so with per subscription, we will go and trigger a collection once per hour, and you can also manually trigger a collection, Shannon. So like
Very
just going
cool.
more in depth into the question that you just asked, right? And so like if I come here and I basically clicked on the gear icon and I went to the authorization systems tab.
Okay.
And as you can see, we have AWS accounts, we have Azure subscriptions, we have GCP projects here. But yeah, just concentrating on this entitlement status here. This is the last time the collection happened for this particular subscription, right? And so if you had made changes on your subscription and you feel that the you want to see these changes like as quickly as possible be reflected in the Enter Permissions Management app, you just come here to this three dot menu and say collect data, and it will trigger the data collection for that particular subscription
That's really cool.
at that point in time, and the data collection would commence, and it would complete based on the size of your overall subscription, right? If you're dealing with a large subscription with a large amount of data, it definitely takes a longer time for us
Sure.
to process, but it's usually between 10 to 30 minutes, you can say, right?
Okay. That's
And
still
so
that's still pretty fast given the fact that some of these environments are vast and huge. That's still pretty fast, I would think.
Right, and so if you don't do that, we do send a collection job within the hour, and I mean you are basically in the you're basically in the regular queue of collections, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you can also do this, and you can see the changes reflected sort of in an ASAP format if you were to do this. And so like remember to see the entitlement status whenever you make a change and you see, oh, why is it not reflected inside of Enter Permissions Management? Check the entitlement status. If the timestamp that's given here is less than the timestamp that you had made those changes during, then you obviously have to trigger a collection to see those changes being reflected in the application.
That's
So
that's pretty powerful. I like the fact that it does that. Now,
mhm,
obviously this is a SaaS solution. Do you
mhm.
have to worry about all of those logs, right? Or is that just part of what you pay for in the sense that it's, the different layers of cloud computing SaaS, you don't have to worry as much about storing that data. It's just done as a part of the solution. It seems like that's the case here, but I thought to ask just because I can only
Mhm.
imagine somebody might be tuning in, down the road and, oh, this sounds amazing and awesome, but my environment's huge. Do I have to worry about standing anything else up? And I don't think you do, but I'm curious.
Yeah, and the answer is absolutely not. You don't have to worry about that.
That's pretty powerful.
We basically use the APIs that are provided by the cloud service provider to get all the data, and everything is handled by our SaaS. So like writing your data to our files, and the files are then processed by the entire back end of our application, and then it results in the front end. It just
That's cool.
if you do have a bigger subscription, it might take a little longer of a time. And like for like organizations with like thousands of subscriptions, Shannon, like you can easily see the difference between a subscription that does not have that much data versus a subscription that has a lot of data. You will see that collections happen quicker for the subscriptions that have lesser data, right? And rightfully
Sure.
so. I mean, it's
Sure.
just easier to process, easier to show you guys, and like one collection from one subscription does not stop a collection and processing for another subscription, right? So
Yeah.
everything like takes its own time. It's in its own due process, and it comes back. So that's one thing that I would caution our customers to know, like the size of your subscriptions. And AWS accounts and GCP projects, if you're customers of those cloud service providers, they do matter. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. That's interesting though, because of the fact that, I think through solutions like this, when everything was hosted on premises, which feels like it's a bygone era, right? Like we don't, we on premises, what's that anymore? I mean, people still they have environments on premises, but they're more hybrid than anything if they still have stuff on premises. And I think about a solution like this 20 years ago would have been a massive undertaking. And the fact that it's literally enabling it in your environment, enabling the data collectors from the different clouds, and you get
Yeah.
all of this tooling. I mean, yeah, you have to pay for it, right? I mean, it makes sense. It's the economies of scale side of the coin with cloud computing, but you're not also on the hook to maintain it, right? Like that's just I don't know, it's
Yeah.
just hit me. I was like, that's pretty substantial.
And Shannon, you might have an idea for a future stream where we talk about how data collection actually works like under the hood. And so
Ooh,
if
that
we
could be
can provide
cool.
education to our customers with regards to how that is working, and how you onboard, and how the onboarding process helps facilitate collection, and how the collection actually takes place, that's a really good topic to talk about on a future stream.
Ooh, I think you're giving yourself work there,
I think
Guru.
I'm giving
No,
myself.
but I mean, I think it's something that we'll probably have to because I think you're out most of January, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll look to do that maybe in the late winter, early spring, because I do think this is a topic that folks might be really curious to know a little bit more on. And if we're able to showcase a little bit about the data collection, what it's collecting, how fast it's collecting, and maybe even trigger some of the data collections, that could be a cool and valuable tool for customers who are trying to figure out how does this actually work? Because, when I first learned about this product right before it reached general availability, um, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, this is just it's vast. It's a big mighty tool in the tool belt of IAM, right? Identity and access management. But
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just the more I learn about it, the more I see. I'm like, this is really impressive.
Yeah, and speaking of how vast the tool is, I think that we can go over a couple of more things about how how you can remediate these like super identities, and how you can even remediate like over provisioned active identities. So like
I like
the
it.
so a nice segue there, right? And
Yeah.
so and so we talked about how to exclude a user from PCI. We talked about how often collection happens, right? But let's say that some of these super users should not be super users and should
Right.
instead be only limited to the activity that they actually do on the cloud service provider, right? And in this particular in this particular subscription. And this the same sort of logic applies to not only super identities but
Okay.
also over provisioned active identities. And basically, what over provisioned active identities are is basically very simply it's an identity that has access to privileges that they've not used. Basically, the
Ah.
entire idea of cloud infrastructure entitlement management is to keep these over provisioned active identities under control. So the rules of right sizing apply to both kinds of identities, but
Okay.
we put them in separate lists because super identities are supposed to be administrators, right? And over provisioned active identities, these are not administrators, and these are active users, but they're clearly not using all the permissions that they've been granted, right? And so
Yeah.
like that is also important to note. So in order for us to remediate these users at scale, we can go into the remediation module. And then in the remediation module, we can go into the permissions tab right here.
Okay.
When you go to the permissions tab, the first thing you want to do is like if you want to set any of these filters, you can go ahead. Else you can just click apply and see
Oh,
what
it
we
just
show
grabs
here, and
everything.
we show all of these users, right? And so one user that showed up in the super identities list, Shannon, is this user right here, Naveen Tejas. So this user right here has this owner role attached to them at the subscription scope, right? And
Okay.
obviously they should not be having this role, right? This gives them unfettered access, and where they're only using so many of those permissions. And so you can actually go and check this user, and we have a couple of different things that you can do. You can add a role to this user, which I'm not sure you want to do for this guy, but we provide that
But you
option.
but but you could. That's interesting.
But
And you can
you
also
could,
remove
right?
roles. Yeah.
We're not only a right size. We don't you don't only have to do right sizing here. You can also add roles as and when when you please. We provide that
Right.
functionality. You also remove roles, which is something that you probably want to do. You can also add or remove granular actions from this
Oh,
user, right?
that's
But
actually really cool.
yeah, but I think the coolest part, Shannon, is the ability for to do these quick actions, right? Because if you're removing tasks or removing roles like granular, sometimes you don't know what you're removing, right? And
True.
sometimes you're like, I just want to, revoke this high user from doing any high risk activity
Okay.
whatsoever, right? And like I'm just gonna like do a quick action, protect any hackers who just happen to hack into this user from doing anything that could affect my cloud infrastructure, and create a resource that I don't want, etc. Right? And so I can go ahead and click this button, and this button it says, are you sure you want to change the permission? So basically, we provide three options. One option is you can close this and say, I never mind,
Oh,
right?
whoops. Yeah, I didn't mean to do
Whoops.
that.
Yeah, but the other two options are to generate a script that will do this in your cloud environment, or you can ask Entra Permissions Management to actually execute this for you, and we will do that for you. So
What's the difference between the 2, right? Like, so generate a script is one side of it, executes like, why would you choose one over the other?
Okay, that's a really good question, right? So let's first talk about executing, right?
Okay,
So executing means we are essentially creating a new role for that user and attaching that role to that user, right? So
okay,
obviously, in order for us to do this, we need write access. Enter permission, we meaning enter permissions management needs write access into your subscription in this case, right? And so if I go back to that gear icon when I clicked on it, another column that we have here is called controller status. And when your controller status is enabled, that means that we have write access into your into your subscription in this
mm,
case, right? And
okay,
this is based on when you do the onboarding. You basically give enter permissions management that service principal. You give it write permissions, in addition to the read permissions. And so, like when we talk about data collection in the future, Shannon, that will definitely come up, and like I will explain like the permissions that enter permissions management needs in order to run the application, right? And we have this all documented as well, and we have videos on onboarding on YouTube that explain this process as well. So the idea is that if you give us write access into your cloud environment, we can we can create roles on our side, and we can actually attach those roles to users inside of inside of your cloud environment. So that is
sure.
what the execute button does. However, if your controller status is disabled, which means you only gave enter permissions management read access to your cloud account, then this execute button will not even be visible for you.
Oh, okay,
We can't even do it, right?
okay,
But what we can do is that we can help you generate a so that you can actually run this on your subscription as an admin, of course, by yourself, and actually see what enter permissions management like suggests. And this is a sort of a life cycle that customers go through when trying enter permissions management, right? Right, Shannon. Like
yeah,
they start off with read only mode, and then they gain trust in the platform, and then they go into read write mode, which is enabling your controller. But when they start off at read only mode, it doesn't mean that they cannot do remediation.
right,
It just means that enter permissions management
can't do
cannot
it,
do
right.
remediation on your behalf. So you can go ahead and let's click on generate script and see what happens, right?
Yeah, this
I
will be
I, I,
kinda
I
cool.
click on generate script, and now I have actions here. I can download the script and download the JSON. So when I actually download the script for this particular user, you can see I want to keep this, and I want to like show it in the Finder, and I want to actually see what is in that script. So I'm opening it up in VS Code. Can you see my VS Code,
Oh, yeah,
Shannon?
yeah, actually, that works out really well, so,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
I think that's I think it 'cause we did do a little bit of prep, I think
yeah,
it's, picking the last little bit of prep so, yeah, this works out really well, I think everybody should be able to see that just fine, but I
yeah.
like the fact that it does it in the AZ-CLI, that's interesting. I've always said the AZ-CLI is a little easier to get started with, especially if you're multi-cloud, especially if you don't have PowerShell as a background, right, and you're more of a bash person in general. So I think it's interesting that Enterprise Management is using the AZ-CLI for the script. That's kind of cool.
Right, and like we also want to be able to provide like more ways to change cloud infrastructure in the future. Like even
Yeah.
Terraform has become more popular.
Oh, it's
Uh,
true. It's
Yeah,
true.
and if you are a PowerShell user, we want to be able to provide you the PowerShell capability as well. So basically, what we're doing here is that we are creating a role definition based on this JSON file over here, which I didn't download, but it essentially it has the role definition for the role that is based on the activity that this user has done.
Okay.
Correct?
So
And
is
and
that more of
so
like a sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Is that more like a custom role? Like if you wanted to actually take a look at a
Exactly.
role,
It's
okay,
it's
it's
more
really
it's more
helpful
like a
there.
custom role. Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so once you have that JSON also downloaded, you create a role definition based on this JSON, and then you assign the role to this user at the subscription scope. And so this is the second step. And then you revoke the existing role, which was the owner role in this case, from that user. And so this is essentially what Entra Permissions Management is doing, but behind the scenes as well. So I mean, during the time that you are still in read only mode, you can still do remediation and still have a test drive as to what the capability of Entra Permissions Management actually is. So pretty cool stuff. And yeah, that's really how you would go about right sizing these users. And you can checkbox multiple users at once. Um, um,
Oh, so that's kind of how
and
you would
do
scale
bulk
out.
remediation wherever
Yeah,
it makes sense. And so we're not suggesting do bulk remediation for users that are like totally different from each other.
sure.
Like you should not do that. But users that are similar and you want to like do the same sorts of things with, and you want to provide the same sort of role, roles too. This is a good tool for that as well.
Very cool.
Right.
Now, one of the things we have kind of touched on loosely is analytics.
Hmm.
And I think that kind of covers what you had gone through, where I was like, oh, we should get this in front of a large audience of folks, either folks tuning in live or people watching on demand. I think the analytics might be something we can go dig into next.
Right, exactly. And this is like the crawl, walk, run scenario that you're
So,
talking about.
yeah, is running
This
analytics?
is the run. This is,
Nice.
yeah,
Okay.
this is probably. I mean, is it the run? I mean, I guess it is, right?
It's
Because
it's a
like
it's a light jog, a light jog.
it's a light jog. Depending, and it really depends on like where you are in your permissions creep index reduction journey, right?
Okay.
So if you have already done some permission creep index reduction in the past, like obviously you have to keep on doing it because your cloud infrastructure keeps going, you keep adding new identities, and you have to keep monitoring your cloud environment over and over again. But like there are even more ways that you can reduce your permission creep index even more and like sort of operationalize it in a way. I would
Mhm.
say that operationalization is the run phase, right? This
Okay.
is, like you said, this is the jog phase. So this is the analytics platform. And as you can see, when you come to analytics, look at this filter here. We're only filtering the users that are included in PCI only. If you wanted to see all
Ah,
users, you could see all users, but we're only showing the users that are included in the PCI calculation. And also, if you go through this list and find any, admins or admin-like people that you don't want to include in the PCI calculation, all you have to do is come here to this three-dot menu next to this identity, go to tags, and then tag this user with a CK exclude from PCI. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can also include from the PCI calculation from analytics as well. So really a nice tool that you have there. But when you actually dig deeper into analytics and into like a user's like unused and used dichotomy, we go very granular, right, Shannon?
mhm,
um, and we see that, hey, in these services, right here, you're not using any of the actions in these services, right? So this provides that sort of granular view that is important from making some of those right decisions, right? And you can even go here and you can filter, hey, I want to see like the high risk tasks that this user has access to, and we filter out all the read activity and focus on only high risk. And so these are the high risk activities that you've been access to this identity for, but they're not even using, right? And you can see also where they're getting those, where there's where they're getting those permissions from, either from Azure roles or through groups, right? In this case, and obviously this helps makes more granular right size decisions. You can then go to remediation and you can go to the remove button, and then you can actually remove the granular tasks that this user has attached to them that they're not using. And so that's really how analytics will work. And again, we have reports on all of these. You don't have to go through the paginated list in the UI.
okay.
You can go through our you can the CSV files and really like operationalize it in that way. And this is a really cool hackathon idea. Like go through the users in a CSV file, find users that have similar remediation, you know, scenarios that you can implement all at
Yeah,
once.
I like
And
that.
so that is, yeah, and so again, like as far as like operationalizing all of this, like that's the direction that I went. But yeah, this is really how you would go about like reducing the PCI of your account. And if you do these three things, your PCI it should reduce dramatically.
Yeah.
And
Now,
yeah.
I've
Mhm.
got a question, and I know we didn't talk about this, but how how is a high risk definition formed? Is it is it based upon read write? Is it based upon
it's based upon that categorization, right, Shannon? So any task that provides write, update, or delete access
okay, so it's all of
is
those.
are high risk tasks,
Got
and
it.
any other activity that provides read access are they're not high risk. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
So here's another question. If you flipped some of those super users who aren't really using anything back to reader, would that reduce your PCI
Yes,
index?
it would. It would.
Okay.
It would.
Okay. So I suspected as much, but I wanted to make sure that anybody that's tuning in uh, live or after the fact, right, sort of
Mhm.
understands that even switching those super users to a reader role, that
Mhm.
will also reduce the PCI. Very, very cool stuff. Very
Yeah,
cool stuff.
absolutely. It will reduce the PCI because even if you have even in the reader role, if you have some activity that's unused, we take into account that activity is relatively low risk when compared to write, update, or delete activity. So your PCI will still be low
So
in the
now,
low range.
and no customer has this, but let's just say a customer had readers across the board versus and like maybe a handful of like super admins, they'd have a much lower PCI even though a bunch of folks had access to read things, right?
Correct.
Okay.
They would have a much lower PCI, and their PCI would probably be in the low range to start out with, Shannon. And what we would suggest for those customers to and those subscriptions to do is that do even more granular right sizing of those reader roles. You
Yeah.
know, and who knows, maybe you have a lot of things in the reader role that you're not even using. This provides that kind of visibility to that, because when you do role based access, one of the things that is not so great about role-based access is that you lose the granular view of
You
how those
do.
permissions are actually being used. So you have that now with Entra Permissions Management. And so at the end of the day, it's up to administrators whether they want to do anything about it or not. We are not the decision makers here. We just provide you the
Right.
visibility and the tools.
But I think it's interesting that if a customer was more security conscious and they only had a handful of super users to begin with, but they had a lot of readers, that could still be well, I mean, a malicious actor would have a harder time getting access to those roles to do anything, but that might not necessarily be something you want either, right? Because people could read probably a good chunk of the configuration within your environment. That may not necessarily be a good thing either. So, but I just like the fact that you have a lot of flexibility with the product. I think it's a very interesting product because of the fact that it spans across multiple clouds. You're able to see exactly what's happening in your environment in almost real time. I mean, the fact that it updates every hour, that's impressive. Um, so I definitely appreciate you taking the time today to go into it a little bit more in detail. And I don't know if folks have been paying attention, but that's Guru's Twitter handle. So connect with him there. I'll also include his LinkedIn handle in the YouTube show notes if you're watching this after the fact. Guru is active on social media, so he would easily answer questions or direct you to the right people that could help you on your journey with Entra Permissions Management.
Yeah, definitely a millennial in the social media.
I love
So
it. I love
yeah,
it.
following up.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, right. And that's what we try. Although it's hard to know what the future of Twitter is going to be like, but follow us, and we'll be there until the end. Or if there is no end and it just evolves, we'll still be there. So follow us. And with that, what I am going to do is I'm going to take our active viewers and move them over to. We're going to rate a channel. Let's see who's on. Oh, our good pals, the Alt F4 stream. They're actually going to do a stream for us on Entra Permissions Management next week at this time. So I will take everybody over there. Let me start that raid now. And I'll flip back over to our stream. And so thanks again, Guru. I appreciate it.
No problem.
With that, we will end the show now. And you can find the show in our YouTube as well. I think it shows up almost immediately. So check it out. Stay tuned. We've got some more Entra Permissions Management content for you as the next month and a half unfolds.
Awesome. Thank you.